The cry beneath the storm. The wind howled across the savannah, turning the tall grass into waves of gold and shadow. Clouds rolled over the horizon, heavy, swollen, dark, carrying the promise of rain and the threat of thunder. For most creatures, the storm meant shelter. For one, it meant survival. She was a zebra, her coat streaked with mud, her breathing shallow and uneven. She had wandered far from her herd, searching for safety, but found only silence and the faint whisper of danger. Around her leg, half buried beneath the dirt, a steel wire coiled tight, a poacher's snare cruel and deliberate. Every movement drew blood. Every attempt to escape pulled the wire deeper into her flesh. Her belly was swollen with life. Inside her, a heartbeat fluttered, a life waiting to begin. But time was running out. The storm broke. The first drops hit the earth like warning shots. Lightning carved the sky in white flashes, and somewhere in the distance, a ranger named Daniel was heading toward the noise. Daniel had spent years in this wilderness, tracking, protecting, saving when he could, mourning when he couldn't. He knew the land, the smell of the wind, the meaning behind every sound. But this cry was different. It wasn't the roar of a lion or the low call of a wounded antelope. It was sharper, desperate, the voice of a creature that knew it was dying. He gunned the jeep forward, headlights slicing through the curtain of rain. The wipers thrashed back and forth as thunder rolled across the plains. Every instinct in him screamed that something was wrong, terribly wrong. Then, in the beam of his lights, he saw it. The zebra collapsed, motionless, except for the trembling of her flank, and the glint of steel, cutting through flesh. Daniel's boots hit the mud before the jeep even stopped. He knelt beside her, his hands moving fast, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "Easy, girl," he whispered, his words swallowed by the rain. "I've got you." The zebra's eyes flicked open, wild, terrified. But something in his tone made her still, if only for a moment. Her breath came in bursts, each one weaker than the last. Daniel reached into his kit, pulled out his wire cutters, and began the work that every ranger both dreaded and prayed for, the delicate, brutal act of undoing a human cruelty. The wire was embedded deep. Every snip released a rush of blood and a sound like tearing fabric. Daniel's hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. He knew if he was too slow, she'd bleed out. Too fast, and she'd panic, thrash, and rip the wound open herself. "Stay with me," he said, as if she could understand. "You're not alone." Minutes stretched like hours. Rain drenched them both, man and animal, predator and protector, two lives balanced on a blade's edge. Finally, with one last twist, the wire gave way. The snare snapped free, curling into the mud like a dead snake. Daniel pressed his hands against the wound, wrapping it tight with a strip of gauze. The zebra's chest heaved. She was weak, trembling, but alive. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw not just an animal, but a mother fighting to keep a promise. In the distance, lightning cracked again, and with it came another sound, low, rhythmic, almost like a drum. Hooves. The herd was near. But Daniel didn't move. He stayed by her side as she tried to rise and failed. Her legs gave out, her body collapsing again into the mud. She was exhausted. So was he. For a moment, he wondered if he had done enough, if saving her from the trap was just the beginning of a slower death. Then, something shifted. She lifted her head and turned toward him. In her dark, glassy eyes, he saw a strange calm, not fear, not aggression, but trust. The kind of trust the wild rarely gives. The rain began to fade, the clouds breaking apart into streaks of light. The world exhaled. Daniel sat beside her in the silence that followed, both of them breathing the same heavy air, both marked by the same storm. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Because within that dying zebra, a second heartbeat had survived. And soon, very soon, that life would enter the world in a way no one could have imagined. The storm breaks, life begins. The rain eased into a whisper. The great savannah, moments ago a sea of chaos, now shimmered under the silver light of a reluctant moon. Every blade of grass glistened. Every sound, the wind, the insects, the distant roll of thunder, felt like the slow heartbeat of the earth finding its rhythm again. Daniel knelt beside the wounded zebra, his hands trembling, the scent of wet soil and blood heavy in the air. He had done what he could, cleaned the wound, stopped the bleeding, whispered prayers into the storm. But as the sky began to clear, a deeper truth settled over him. Survival wasn't guaranteed. She lay still, chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Each exhale carried pain, but beneath that pain, something else stirred. A ripple ran across her belly, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Daniel froze. He knew that movement. He'd seen it before, in elephants, giraffes, antelope. It was the language of life waiting to emerge. She wasn't just surviving. She was about to give birth. He reached for his radio, static crackling through the quiet night. "This is Ranger Daniel," he whispered. "I've got an injured zebra. She's pregnant. Contractions starting." The reply came faint and broken. The storm had damaged the signal. "Copy that. Nearest unit, 30 kilometers. Hold position until morning." Morning. Too long. Daniel looked back at her. The zebra's body trembled, her muscles seizing with effort. The foal was coming, whether the world was ready or not. He moved closer, speaking softly, his voice steady against the night. "It's okay, you're not alone." He didn't know why he said it, maybe for her, maybe for himself. In that moment, it didn't matter. They were two souls bound by circumstance, caught in the quiet war between life and death. Lightning flashed again in the distance, far enough now to be only memory. Daniel tore open a medical kit and spread what little he had: bandages, cloth, clean water, and patience. Minutes turned into hours. Each contraction came stronger than the last, echoing through the grasslands like the earth itself was straining to help. The zebra's cries rose and fell with the wind, not of fear, but determination. Daniel could feel it in the air, that primal energy that always surrounded birth in the wild. It wasn't just biology. It was defiance. Every mother that brought life into this harsh land was challenging the rules of nature, rules written in teeth and blood. And tonight, she was winning. Then, it happened. A final tremor. A long cry. And in the dim light of Daniel's flashlight, a shape slipped into the world, small, trembling, and covered in the thin veil of afterbirth. The foal lay still for a moment. Then, a sudden twitch. A gasp. A sound, soft, new, uncertain. The first breath of a creature that had nearly never been born. Daniel exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath the entire time. He stepped back, giving space, eyes wide in awe. The mother lifted her head weakly, nuzzling her newborn with a tenderness that silenced everything else. The storm was gone. Only the rhythmic sound of rain dripping from acacia leaves remained, a lullaby written for survivors. The foal struggled to stand. Legs too long, knees too soft, it stumbled, collapsed, tried again. Every fall was followed by another attempt. And then finally, with a trembling push, it stood. Its first steps, fragile, uneven, felt like a miracle. The ranger watched, his chest heavy with emotion he couldn't explain. He had seen life and death countless times in this land, but never this close, never this raw. The mother turned to look at him, that same gaze from earlier, calm and deep, as if she knew he had been a part of something sacred. And in that moment, Daniel realized he was witnessing not just survival, but gratitude. The foal stumbled toward its mother, pressing against her side. But then, something extraordinary happened. It turned. For just a second, it faced Daniel. The flashlight caught its eyes, wide, curious, glistening with the reflection of 1,000 stars. It took one uncertain step toward him. Then another. And then it stopped, right at the edge of his boots, and bowed its tiny head. Daniel didn't move. He didn't breathe. He could feel the pulse of that small creature, faint, fragile but fierce. It wasn't fear. It was connection. The mother gave a soft snort, and the foal turned back, returning to her side. Together, they stood in the moonlight, two survivors bound by chance and one human who refused to walk away. Daniel wiped the rain from his face, but his hands were shaking, not from cold, but from the enormity of what had just happened. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "You did it, you both did it." As dawn began to creep over the horizon, light spilled across the plains, painting the world gold once again. The storm was gone. But its echo, the echo of life, remained. And Daniel knew, this was only the beginning of a story the wild itself would remember. The silence after the storm morning arrived softly. The kind of morning that feels like an apology, gentle light brushing over the earth, as if the sun itself were sorry for the violence of the night before. The savannah steamed with life returning to motion, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked grass and renewal. Daniel stood near the zebra and her foal, the remains of the night's chaos lying quiet around them. A broken branch. Torn grass. Mud that still bore the tracks of struggle. But among it all, there was peace. The mother zebra grazed weakly, her movements slow but deliberate. The foal, still wobbly on its legs, stayed close, mimicking her every motion, learning life one breath at a time. Daniel watched with a sense of reverence, as though intruding on a sacred ritual. In this light, he could see the wound on the mother's flank, deep but healing. The hyenas had scattered hours ago, leaving behind nothing but distant laughter carried by the wind. And yet, that sound still echoed in his head, a reminder that peace in the wild was always temporary. He radioed the outpost again, his voice low and measured. Ranger Daniel reporting. Mother zebra alive. Foal delivered successfully. Area secure for now. Static answered him first, then the faint voice of his colleague. Copy that, Daniel. Backup en route. Estimated arrival, 2 hours. 2 hours. Long enough for the wild to rewrite every story. He looked back toward the horizon, endless plains stretching into golden mist. From somewhere beyond the ridge, the low grunt of a lion carried on the breeze. It was distant, but enough to make his pulse quicken. Life had returned, and with it, danger. Daniel took a slow step forward, eyes on the foal. The little one turned to him again, its eyes full of innocence, its curiosity unbroken by the world's cruelty. It took a cautious step, then another, as if remembering the moment they shared during the night. The ranger smiled softly. In the city, they called this work. Out here, it felt more like witnessing something divine. But something in the distance caught his attention, movement, rhythmic and heavy. A herd. Zebras. At least 20 of them, emerging through the trees like ghosts reborn from mist. Their black and white stripes shimmered in the sunlight, a moving symphony of patterns designed by evolution itself. The herd approached slowly, cautiously. The mother lifted her head and called out, a low, trembling whinny. A reply came almost instantly. Her family had found her. Daniel backed away, heart pounding with relief and awe. He knew the bond between herd members, how they protected their own, mourned their lost, celebrated their newborns. It wasn't emotion as humans understood it, but it was something close. Something ancient. The lead stallion, a massive zebra with scars across his chest, stepped forward first. He sniffed the air, then the foal. The others circled, murmuring softly, nuzzling the mother's neck as if greeting a survivor returned from battle. Daniel had seen this kind of reunion before, elephants, buffalo, even lions, but every time, it left him speechless. It was the wild's version of grace. Unspoken forgiveness for the suffering endured. Then the foal, trembling but brave, stepped away from its mother and moved toward the herd. It stood there, facing the stallion, as if waiting for approval. The stallion lowered his head. A single, deliberate gesture. Acceptance. The foal was now one of them. Daniel exhaled slowly. He felt the knot in his chest loosen, that constant tension every ranger carried, knowing how fragile life was out here. He'd done his job. But more than that, he'd witnessed a miracle. The mother turned one last time to look at him. There was no fear in her eyes. Only calm recognition. As if, in some wordless way, she understood. He raised a hand in farewell, not to be seen, but to be felt. And then, as quietly as they'd appeared, the herd began to move on, into the endless stretch of savanna, the foal trotting beside its mother. Their stripes blended into the grass and light until they became one with the land again. Daniel remained still for a long time, listening. No engines. No voices. Just wind. The kind of silence that only exists after something profound has passed through. He crouched down and touched the damp soil, the same ground that had seen blood, birth, and redemption in less than a night. The wild was cruel, yes. But it was also merciful in ways humanity often forgot to notice. He whispered under his breath, "Take care of her," as if the wind could carry the words to wherever the herd would rest that night. The sun climbed higher, burning away the mist, painting the world gold once again. A new day had begun, not just for the zebra, but for the ranger who had watched her fight to live. As he walked back toward his jeep, Daniel looked over his shoulder one last time. The plains looked empty now. But he knew better. Somewhere out there, a foal born under lightning was taking its first real steps into the world, and maybe, just maybe, it would remember the man who stood in the storm to give it a chance. Tracks in the dust, the sun had risen high by the time Daniel began the long walk back to his vehicle. The storm had washed the savannah clean, but as the ground dried, the truth of the night began to reappear, written in the soft clay beneath his boots. Every footprint told a story. His own, heavy and deliberate. The zebras, lighter, chaotic, desperate. And beside them, a pattern he didn't want to see. Claw marks. 5-pointed, deep, deliberate. Hyenas. At least 3, maybe 4. He knelt down, tracing the impressions with a gloved hand. Fresh. The edges still sharp, untouched by the wind. They'd come back. He straightened slowly, scanning the horizon. The plains looked calm, but calm was always an illusion in this part of Africa. Predators never wandered aimlessly. They followed instinct, scent, memory. And Daniel knew, predators remembered. The mother zebra was moving again, leading her foal toward the herd's grazing grounds. But if the hyenas had caught their scent, they wouldn't give up easily. A newborn was a beacon, fragile, slow, easy prey. He reached for his radio. Ranger Daniel to patrol unit. Possible hyena activity near Quadrant 7. Requesting visual confirmation. Static. The storm had damaged more than he thought. He sighed. For now, he was alone again. Daniel started the engine of his Jeep, the low rumble echoing across the plains. He drove slowly, following the faint path of the herd. Every few minutes, he stopped, scanning through binoculars, searching for movement, dust, or sound. Hours passed. Heat shimmered over the land like liquid glass. The world was silent except for the rhythmic hum of insects and the distant cry of an eagle riding the thermals above. Then, in the far distance, he saw them, black and white shapes against the golden sea. The zebra herd. Safe, for now. But then something else caught his eye, a flicker of movement behind a ridge. Low, fast, coordinated. Not the herd. He lifted the binoculars again. There, shadows sliding through the tall grass, silent, predatory. Hyenas. 3 of them, stalking. Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He could feel the familiar rush of adrenaline, that thin line between fear and duty. He'd seen what a pack could do, how efficient, how cruel their method could be. And now, a mother and her newborn stood in their path. He slammed the gear into drive and pushed forward, the Jeep tearing across the open field, engine roaring like thunder reborn. Dust exploded behind him, a trail of urgency carved into the land. The herd scattered at the sound, alarmed but not yet panicked. Daniel could see the mother zebra lift her head, ears pricked, muscles tense. The hyenas had noticed him too. They slowed, pacing the ridge, uncertain. Predators calculated risk. And right now, Daniel was the bigger animal. He brought the Jeep to a halt between the ridge and the herd, stepping out slowly, rifle slung over his shoulder, not as a weapon but as a warning. The wind carried his scent toward them, human and unfamiliar. The pack hesitated. One moved forward, teeth bared in silent defiance. Daniel raised his hand, shouting, a deep guttural sound that cut across the field. It wasn't language. It was dominance. The hyena paused, then turned, snapping at its companions. Moments later, they melted back into the grass, vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. The ranger exhaled, lowering his arm. He knew they'd be back eventually. They always came back. He looked toward the herd again. The foal was pressed close to its mother, trembling but unharmed. The stallion stood watch nearby, his body angled between danger and safety. Daniel could feel it again, that unspoken rhythm of the wild. Every creature, every heartbeat, part of an endless cycle of protection and threat. He whispered to himself, life never gets a break here. The air was still now, thick with heat and silence. Daniel crouched by the tire tracks his Jeep had made, tracing the marks absently. He thought of how close they'd come, how one wrong minute could have erased the fragile miracle he'd witnessed only hours before. The foal, small and unsteady, tried to mimic the older zebras, learning to graze, to walk in rhythm. Every step it took was a lesson written by instinct and watched by danger. He smiled faintly. Nature didn't wait for safety. It thrived in the shadow of threat. As the sun began to fall, painting the sky in streaks of red and violet, Daniel took one last look at the herd. They moved together now, no longer scattered, but unified. A single pulse across the land. The foal glanced back once, as if sensing him. For a second, the world seemed to pause. That same connection again, silent but undeniable. Daniel whispered, almost in awe, "You're stronger than I thought." Then he climbed back into the jeep and turned toward the horizon. The job wasn't over. The wild was watching, waiting, always ready to test the balance again. And somewhere behind him, in the settling dust, the first faint echoes of laughter returned, the hyenas regrouping, patient as the night. With it came the sound Daniel feared most: silence. Not peace, not calm, silence. The kind that predators carry like a cloak. Daniel parked his jeep beside a lone acacia and killed the return of the pack. Night crept back over the plains, slow and heavy. The day's heat sank into the earth, and lights. From here, he could just make out the herd, faint stripes shimmering in moonlight. They were huddled close, forming a living wall around the foal. Every so often, the stallion lifted his head, nostrils flaring, reading the air. The ranger lifted his binoculars. Nothing. But his gut told him otherwise. Somewhere in the dark, eyes were watching. He checked his rifle, loaded but safety on. Rangers didn't shoot unless there was no choice. His duty was balance, not interference. Yet the memory of that foal's trembling breath burned behind his ribs like a brand. He whispered under his breath, "Not tonight, not while I'm here." A faint breeze stirred the grass. Then came the sound, a low, nervous cackle, distant but rising. Hyenas. At first, just one. Then two. Then more. Their calls overlapped, a grotesque laughter that didn't belong to joy. It was the sound of anticipation. Daniel's pulse quickened. He grabbed his flashlight and scanned the ridge. There, movement. Dozens of eyes catching the light for a heartbeat, then gone again. The pack had doubled. Maybe tripled. They'd been waiting for dusk. Waiting for fear. He radioed in again. Ranger Daniel reporting, hyena pack returning to Quadrant 7. Request immediate backup. Static, then a faint voice, copy team deploying now. ETA, 40 minutes. 40 minutes. An eternity in the dark. Daniel climbed onto the jeep's hood, watching the grass ripple like water. The herd began to shift uneasily, hooves scraping dirt. The foal pressed itself against its mother, trembling. He had to buy them time. He grabbed a flare from the glove box, pulled the cap, and fired. It screamed into the air, bursting red across the sky. For an instant, the land glowed like daylight. Dozens of shapes froze mid-stride hyenas, scattered in a half-circle around the herd. The light burned their confidence away. But only for a moment. When the flare hissed out, the laughter returned, closer this time. Daniel started the engine and roared toward the herd, headlights slicing through darkness. He swung the vehicle sideways, forming a barrier between predators and prey. Dust swirled, caught in the beams like golden mist. He revved once, twice, an animal warning of his own. The pack hesitated. The lead hyena, a massive scarred brute, crept forward, its coat glinting silver in the light. Its eyes weren't wild, they were calculating. It had seen humans before. It knew what they could do. Daniel raised his voice, deep and commanding. "Back off." The animal snarled, pacing left and right, testing him. Another flare hissed through the night, green this time, painting the field in ghostly color. The herd shifted but didn't break. The standoff stretched thin as wire. Then from the darkness, came a sound Daniel didn't expect, a cry. Not from the foal, but the mother. Sharp, urgent, filled with defiance. The herd reacted instantly. Dozens of zebras turned outward, forming a circle, hooves stamping, heads low, tails flicking like whips. It was instinct older than memory. Defend the young, stand as one. The hyenas lunged. A blur of stripes and teeth erupted as the herd kicked, reared, and charged. Daniel felt the earth shake beneath him. Dust and cries filled the air, turning night into chaos once more. He fired a warning shot, one single crack into the sky. The echo rolled across the plains like thunder. For a moment, even the hyenas faltered. When the dust settled, the pack was retreating, limping, scattered, beaten not by bullets, but by unity. The herd remained tight, protective, breathing heavy clouds into the cool night. Daniel stepped down from the jeep, lowering his weapon. The foal peeked out from behind its mother, wide-eyed but safe. He knelt, exhaustion and relief flooding through him. Under the pale light, the mother zebra looked at him again, that same calm, knowing gaze. She had fought her own battle tonight. He realized, with a strange sense of humility, that she didn't need him anymore. Far on the ridge, the hyenas regrouped, their laughter softer now, resentful. Predators rarely mourned defeat, they simply waited for weakness to return. Daniel knew they'd be back, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But for tonight, the savannah belonged to the living. He looked to the stars, millions of them scattered across an infinite sky, and whispered, another night survived. The wind carried the scent of rain again, faint but familiar, like a promise. The foal leaned against its mother, breathing steady at last. And in that quiet moment, Daniel understood the truth the wild kept teaching him. Life here wasn't about peace. It was about persistence. The law of the wild. The next morning, the plains looked peaceful again. Golden light rippled over the grasslands, disguising the violence that had unfolded only hours before. But in the wild, peace was never more than a brief illusion, a mask the land wore before its next trial. Daniel leaned against his jeep, exhaustion etched deep into his face. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the echoes, the cries, the hooves, the gunshot that split the night. Now, as dawn stretched over the horizon, a convoy of rangers approached. 3 trucks, engines growling softly, carrying his team and one man he'd hoped to avoid, Chief Warden Samuel. Samuel was a man of few words and fewer smiles. Decades in the field had turned him into something like the land itself, weathered, hard, unforgiving. As he stepped down from his vehicle, his gaze swept over the plains, sharp and assessing. "You fired a shot," he said flatly, not a question. Daniel nodded. "Warning shot. No injuries." But the pack was closing in, the herd was trapped. The warden studied him for a long, silent moment. Then he spoke. "You broke protocol." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I saved them." "You interfered," Samuel countered. "The wild has its own balance. You know that better than anyone." There it was, the eternal conflict every ranger carried, duty to protect life, and duty to respect nature's law. He wanted to argue, to explain the sight of that newborn foal trembling in the rain, the sound of its mother fighting against death. But words felt hollow against rules written in policy and paper. He lowered his eyes. "Yes, sir." Samuel's tone softened, almost imperceptibly. "You've got a good heart, Daniel. But out here, heart can get you killed. Or worse, it can change the balance we're meant to keep." He turned away, surveying the empty plains. "Nature doesn't need heroes," he said quietly. "It needs witnesses." The team began their sweep, documenting tracks, tagging locations, noting evidence of predator activity. Daniel walked in silence beside them, the guilt and pride tangled like vines in his chest. They reached the ridge where the hyenas had gathered the night before. The dirt was scuffed, claw marks deep and chaotic. Samuel crouched, tracing them with a finger. 3, maybe 4, he murmured. "They'll move east for a while." Daniel hesitated, then spoke. "They'll come back." Samuel looked up, squinting against the sun. "They always do." It wasn't reassurance. It was truth. As the team prepared to leave, Daniel glanced toward the horizon, searching for the herd. At first, nothing. Then, far beyond a line of acacia trees, he caught sight of movement. Black and white shapes flickering in the morning haze. They were still together. The foal trotted beside its mother, its gait stronger now, more confident. A smile ghosted across his face. It had survived its first night. That was something. He wanted to follow, just for a moment. To make sure. But Samuel's voice cut through his thoughts. "Let it go, Daniel." He turned. "We don't protect individuals here. We protect ecosystems. You forget that, and you stop being useful." Daniel's stomach twisted, but he said nothing. He climbed back into the jeep, dust rising behind the tires as they drove away. Hours later, they reached the outpost, a cluster of steel huts and radio towers standing lonely against the sky. The smell of diesel and coffee mixed with the dry scent of sand and heat. Inside, Daniel sat alone at his desk, filling out the incident report. Time of sighting, 1946. Predator species, Crocuta crocuta, spotted hyena. Intervention method, flare deployment and warning shot. He paused, pen hovering above the page. His mind replayed the scene, the flare's light on the foal's trembling face, the herd standing as one. He wrote one more line, almost involuntarily, outcome, herd survived. Then he stopped, staring at the words. That was all that mattered, wasn't it? Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the sounds of the savannah. He could almost hear the herd in it, faint hoofbeats, a foal's whinny, the echo of survival. Samuel passed by his door, pausing for just a second. You did what you thought was right, he said quietly. Then he added, just remember, right and natural aren't always the same thing. He left without another word. Daniel looked out the window, eyes following the endless horizon. Somewhere out there, life was moving forward, raw, unfiltered, ungoverned. The wild didn't care about rules or regret. It only cared about balance. And as much as it hurt to admit, maybe Samuel was right. Maybe the wild didn't need heroes. But as Daniel leaned back in his chair, closing his tired eyes, he whispered to himself, even so, I'd do it again. Echoes on the wind days passed. The rain dried, the rivers shrank back into their beds, and the savannah returned to its shimmering rhythm, endless, golden, and deceptively calm. From his post at the outstation, Daniel followed the zebra herd's movements through reports, drone footage, and the occasional glint of stripes captured at the edge of dawn. They were alive. Moving. Thriving. The foal, born in storm and blood, was now strong enough to keep pace with the adults. Its legs had steadied. Its stride was sure. Each morning, Daniel told himself that was enough, that he didn't need to see it again, didn't need to check. But each night, he found himself staring toward the horizon anyway, listening for something only his heart could hear. The savannah carried sound like a secret, wind through grass, the hum of insects, the cry of distant birds. Sometimes, when the air was still, Daniel swore he could hear faint hoofbeats echoing through the distance. Maybe memory. Maybe guilt. Maybe both. He had gone back to patrol routines, paperwork, and repairs. But something inside him had changed. He'd seen life fight to exist, raw, violent, beautiful, and it refused to leave him alone. One evening, as the sun melted into the plains, his radio crackled. Unit 3, this is Station Delta. You might want to see this. Check camera trap 12, East Sector, near the dry creek. Daniel adjusted his binoculars and scanned the feed. The footage was grainy, dusk-colored, but clear enough to tell the story. The zebra herd, the same one, was there, clustered near the riverbed. The foal was larger now, its coat brighter, its movements confident. It followed its mother closely, but something was wrong. The mother limped. Daniel froze. Even through the low-resolution feed, he could see it, the uneven gait, the way she paused to rest every few steps. Old wound reopened, maybe. Infection. Or another encounter. He radioed in, trying to sound calm. This is Ranger Daniel. I'm heading out to verify visual anomaly, Quadrant East, near Trap 12. The reply came slow. Copy that. Proceed with caution. No interference unless necessary. He hesitated on that word, unless. He'd already crossed that line once. Now he wondered if fate was daring him to do it again. The jeep rattled over dry earth, headlights slicing through the dimming light. Dust spiraled behind him, the scent of heat and age thick in the air. He drove for nearly an hour before he saw them, faint silhouettes etched against the horizon. The herd. He stopped 100 meters away, watching through binoculars. The mother stood near the center, flanked by others. The foal grazed nearby, tail flicking lazily. For a moment, everything looked right. Then he saw it, a patch of red on her hind leg. Fresh. Daniel exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel. He wanted to rush forward, to do something. Anything. But Samuel's words echoed in his mind. The wild has its own balance. So he waited. The herd began to move as twilight deepened, heading toward a waterhole shimmering faintly in the dying light. But the mother lagged behind, struggling to keep up. The foal stayed beside her, refusing to leave her side. Daniel's chest tightened. There was loyalty there, a kind of love no rulebook could quantify. He'd seen soldiers show less devotion than that tiny creature did for its mother. He whispered into the stillness, "Stay strong, little one." Then something unexpected happened. The herd began to slow. One by one, the zebras turned back, circling around the mother and foal. They weren't abandoning her. They were waiting. Daniel felt his throat tighten. The wild was supposed to be merciless, survival of the fittest, nature without sentiment. But here it was, compassion, written in hoofprints and silence. He watched as the herd formed a half-circle, walking slowly with her, matching her pace, shielding her from predators that might be watching from the tall grass. The foal walked at her side, pressing close, nudging her leg as if urging her onward. And for the first time since the storm, Daniel felt peace. Not because he'd intervened, but because he hadn't needed to. Nature was taking care of its own. The night grew darker, stars spilling across the sky like scattered ash. Daniel stayed until the herd vanished into the silver of moonlight, the sound of their hooves fading into memory. As he sat there, engine idling softly, a realization settled in his chest. Maybe Samuel was right, maybe nature didn't need saving. But sometimes, it just needed a witness. Someone to see that beneath the claws and teeth, there was grace. He turned off the jeep, closed his eyes, and let the wind carry the faintest echo of hoofbeats to him. It was distant, but steady. Life, moving forward. The shadow of the hunt night fell like ink across the plains. The stars hung cold and sharp over the horizon, watching in silence as life unfolded beneath them. Somewhere far from the outpost, a lion's roar trembled through the stillness, deep, commanding, ancient. Daniel woke before dawn, long before the radio check-ins began. Something about the previous night wouldn't leave him. The image of the limping zebra, the loyalty of her herd, the foal's gentle persistence. He needed to make sure they were safe. He poured black coffee into a dented tin mug, the steam curling into the chill morning air. Then, against protocol again, he loaded up the jeep and headed east. The savannah was different at this hour, quiet, expectant, balanced between night and day. Even the wind held its breath. For the first 20 kilometers, he saw nothing. Only the flicker of hares darting through grass, the distant shape of wildebeest in the mist. Then, at the dry creek bed, he found tracks, dozens of them, layered and fresh. Zebra. But beside them, were others. Deeper prints. Wider. Circular pad marks with claw traces just faintly visible. Lions. He crouched beside the tracks, running his hand over the dust. They weren't old, maybe hours. The pride had crossed here recently, and from the spacing, they were moving in silence, deliberate. Hunting. A chill passed through him. He followed slowly, the engine barely above a whisper. The trail wound through scattered acacias, then opened into a wide plain drenched in morning gold. And there, in the distance, he saw them. The zebra herd. Still together. Still moving. But the formation was tighter now, more defensive. The foal trotted near the middle, close to its mother, who still limped slightly but pushed forward with steady determination. Then he saw the lions. 5 of them, crouched low in the tall grass. Golden ghosts, nearly invisible against the earth. Their eyes fixed on the herd. Daniel's pulse quickened. This was the rhythm of the wild, predator and prey, life feeding on life. He knew it. He'd studied it. But seeing it again, knowing those faces, that foal, that mother, tore something inside him open. He grabbed the binoculars, scanning the scene. The lionesses were positioning themselves, fanning out like a net. At the far edge, one large male stood back, the shadow of authority watching. Then from nowhere, a gust of wind shifted. The herd caught the scent. Panic erupted. The air exploded with sound, hooves pounding, dust rising, zebras scattering in every direction. The lions leapt forward, a blur of motion and muscle. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. The mother zebra stumbled, her leg giving way. The foal turned back, refusing to flee without her. He gripped the wheel. Everything in him screamed to intervene, to start the engine, blare the horn, fire another flare, anything. But he froze. Because in that single suspended moment, he remembered Samuel's words, right and natural aren't always the same thing. He couldn't move. He couldn't look away. The lions closed in. And then, something extraordinary happened. The herd, instead of running far, turned back. They circled again, just as before. But this time, it wasn't just protection, it was defiance. The stallion at the front reared, letting out a sound that cut through the chaos, a shrill piercing cry that echoed for miles. The others followed, kicking, charging, pushing the lions back. The predators hesitated. They weren't used to prey standing their ground. The foal darted forward, pressing its head against its mother's neck, urging her, almost commanding her to move. And somehow she did. Limping, staggering, she rose and joined the circle again. Daniel's eyes burned as he whispered under his breath, "Go, just go." The lions, realizing their ambush was broken, retreated slowly, melting back into the grass. Their golden eyes lingered, frustrated but patient. They would try again. But not today. The zebras began to move away, shaken but alive. The foal stayed close to its mother, guiding her step by step through the dust and dawn. Daniel let out a long breath, one he didn't realize he'd been holding. He slumped against the seat, eyes fixed on the retreating silhouettes. He hadn't fired a shot. He hadn't broken the balance this time. Yet somehow the herd had survived again, not because of him, but because of something deeper. Something primal and shared. As the sun climbed over the plains, light washed over the scene, golden and raw. And in that glow, Daniel saw what he'd been missing all along. The wild wasn't cruel. It was honest. It demanded everything, but it gave meaning in return. He turned off the ignition and sat in silence, watching until the last trace of stripes vanished into the heat. The lions disappeared too, heading west, shadows once more. Only the wind remained, whispering through the grass, carrying the scent of dust, sweat, and survival. Daniel whispered softly, "You did it, little one. You saved her." He smiled then, faintly, tiredly, because maybe, in a way, the foal had repaid him. The circle had closed. The return of the storm, the sky was bruised again, the same color it had been the night the foal was born. Thick clouds rolled across the horizon, swallowing the light and silencing the plains. To most, it was just another storm. But to Daniel, it felt like a memory coming back to life. He stood at the edge of the outpost, radio pressed to his ear, listening to static. Reports had been coming in all morning, scattered herds, flash floods near the southern river, and something else, something he couldn't quite shake. East Patrol spotted vultures circling over the old creek, came a voice through the static. Possible carcass, could be the zebra herd. Daniel froze. For days, he had watched them from a distance, strong, alive, defiant. He wanted to believe their story had found peace. But the wild doesn't offer peace, it offers continuity. And continuity often comes with loss. He grabbed his jacket, loaded his jeep, and drove out into the rain. The storm came fast, violent and unpredictable. Rain lashed the windshield in sheets, the wipers barely keeping up. Thunder rolled over the plains like distant cannon fire. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. But Daniel knew these roads, knew the rhythm of the land beneath the chaos. Every bump, every dip in the ground told him where he was. He reached the ridge above the old creek just as lightning split the sky. In that brief flash of white, he saw them. The herd. Scattered, panicked, their silhouettes fractured by rain and mud. He counted quickly, 1, 2, 5, but not the mother. Not the foal. His heart dropped. He parked the jeep and ran, boots sinking into the wet earth. The rain was deafening, but beneath it, he could hear faint cries, not of predators but of distress. He followed the sound down into the hollow. And there she was, the mother zebra, collapsed near the bank, her body half submerged in the rising water. The foal stood beside her, trembling, trying to nudge her up. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. It was the same place, the same riverbed where he'd first found them months ago. The circle had brought them back. He splashed through the mud, calling softly over the roar of rain. "It's okay. I'm here." The foal startled, stepping back, but didn't run. It recognized him, or maybe it just recognized help. Daniel dropped to his knees beside the mother, checking her breathing. Shallow. Weak. She'd been hurt again, perhaps by predators, perhaps just by time. The water was rising fast. If he didn't move her soon, she'd drown. He tried to lift her, but she was too heavy. The foal neighed sharply, circling, its eyes wild with fear. Daniel looked at it, voice breaking over the sound of rain. I know. I'm trying." He grabbed a rope from his pack, looped it under her torso, and tied the other end to the jeep. The engine roared to life, tires spinning in mud as he pulled, inch by inch, dragging her toward higher ground. Then the rope snapped. He fell backward, splashing into the water, mud filling his hands. The river surged again, stronger, faster. The mother let out a weak cry. And then, for the first time, the foal did something no one could have expected. It moved toward the rope. Grabbing it with its teeth, it pulled. Not much, not enough to move her, but enough to help. Together, man and foal strained against the river. Daniel shouted over the storm, "Come on. You can do it." The water clawed at them, cold and merciless, but the rope held this time. Slowly, painfully, they dragged her up the bank. By the time they reached the ridge, Daniel collapsed beside her, chest heaving, soaked to the bone. The foal stood over its mother, nudging her softly, refusing to give up. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a breath. Faint, but real. She was alive. Daniel laughed, the sound half sob, half relief. The rain poured harder, lightning flashing overhead, but he didn't care. They'd done it. Again. He reached out, brushing mud from the foal's mane. "You're just like her," he whispered. "Stubborn. Brave." The foal blinked, leaning into his touch. And in that moment, man and creature stood equal, both survivors of a world that never promised mercy. By morning, the storm had passed. The herd returned, finding them by scent and sound. The mother stirred, weak but alive, as the foal guided her toward the others. Daniel watched from a distance, every muscle in his body aching. He didn't follow this time. He didn't need to. As the sun broke through the clouds, he whispered, "Go on, your story's yours now." And as the herd disappeared once more into the golden expanse, he realized something simple and profound. Sometimes, saving one life isn't about changing nature, it's about honoring it. Because even the smallest act of kindness can echo louder than thunder. The legacy of the plains, the storm had passed, but its memory lingered. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, and every blade of grass sparkled with the last drops of rain. The savannah was quiet again, not silent, but reverent. As if it, too, was remembering what had just survived the night. From the ridge, Daniel watched the herd move across the horizon. The mother walked slower now, but she walked. The foal stayed beside her, strong, sure-footed, every step a promise of life continuing. He didn't follow this time. He just stood there, boots heavy with mud, rain drying on his jacket, heart full in a way he hadn't felt in years. He realized that he didn't need to protect them anymore. They had found their way, and somehow so had he. The outpost radio crackled behind him. "Station Delta to Unit 3, you there, Daniel?" "Copy." He pressed the mic. "Copy. Go ahead. HQ wants a full report on that East Sector incident. Heard you got caught in the flood." Daniel glanced at the plains. The herd was nearly gone now, distant shapes fading into light. "Yeah," he said softly. "Caught in it, but we all made it through." "Good to hear," the voice replied. "Oh, and Daniel? The warden wants to see you when you're back." He smiled faintly. "Of course he does." He started the jeep, the engine coughing once before settling into a steady hum. The road ahead was long and uneven, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Just like the work. Just like the wild. When he arrived, Samuel was waiting outside the command tent, arms folded, expression unreadable. "Reports said you were out during the storm," he said. "Alone." Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir." "You broke protocol again." "I know." Samuel stared at him for a long time, the silence heavy between them. Then, unexpectedly, the older man's expression softened. "You saved her again, didn't you?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Samuel looked past him, toward the plains shimmering in the distance. "You ever wonder," he said quietly, "why we do this job? Why we care so much about things that would survive without us?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because maybe," he said, "sometimes they shouldn't have to survive alone." The warden's eyes lingered on him, then he gave a slow nod. "Get some rest, Ranger. The plains will still be here tomorrow." Weeks passed. The floodwaters dried. The grasses grew tall again. Life, as always, moved forward. But something in the Rangers' camp had changed. Daniel's story, whispered from one post to another, had spread like wildfire. Not because of rules broken, but because of what it reminded everyone of, that empathy wasn't weakness. It was part of the balance, too. Younger rangers began asking questions. About the foal. About what it means to protect without control. And though Daniel never told the story himself, they spoke of it like a legend, the night a man and a zebra fought the storm together. One evening, months later, Daniel returned to the ridge where it had all begun. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised orange and soft violet. And then, as if called by memory, he saw them. The herd. Larger now. Healthier. And among them, a grown foal, taller, stronger, its coat glistening in the dying light. It lifted its head, ears twitching, eyes catching the fading sun. For a brief moment, it looked right at him. Recognition? Maybe. Or maybe it was something deeper, a quiet acknowledgement between two survivors. Daniel raised a hand, a small gesture, more for himself than for them. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, the herd moved on, swallowed by the golden sea of grass. He stood there long after they were gone, the wind curling softly around him. The plains stretched endlessly before him, wild, unpredictable, alive. And for the first time, he didn't feel the need to fix anything. He just wanted to remember. He whispered to the wind, "Take care of them." A faint gust brushed his face, almost like an answer. Back at the outpost, as night fell, Daniel pinned a small note to the wall near the logbooks, something the next generation of rangers might see someday. The wild doesn't need heroes. It needs witnesses. But sometimes, even a witness can make a difference. Outside, the stars burned bright above the savannah. Somewhere in the distance, a zebra called out, a single echoing cry that rolled across the night. It was both an ending and a beginning. And as Daniel listened, smiling faintly, the sound blended with a whisper of the wind, the eternal song of the plains, carrying forward the legacy of one storm, one life, and one man who dared to care.